Hi, YouTube. I am here today with my special guest, the Jambray,
Hello.
and we are going to talk you through the best 5 decks to hit Legend this month. It's a new month, new grind. We had a balance patch not too long ago, so the meta did change a little bit. And we are just going to give you some inspiration on which decks you could potentially play. The first one is a bit of a spicy one. This deck actually just wasn't really a thing before the balance patch, but like suddenly, I don't know who came up with the list. Do you know?
Sunk you.
Sunq did.
Yes.
I saw No Hands Gamer tweet about this that he was doing well with it. I tried it myself. I had a really, really good win rate to Legend on my Europe server. And well, let's just talk about it for a bit. The deck I am talking about is Hero Power Druid.
Yeah.
This one is a bit of a hybrid deck with like some dragon synergy plus the hero power and spell damage stuff. So you can like kind of push some damage early with minions, and then in the later game you can have like the big buffed hero power and spell damage with the swipes. Um, what do you think about this deck? Have you played it at all?
I've played against it a bit. I've seen you play it.
Mm,
It's a good all-rounder deck, I think.
yeah,
You've got game against pretty much everything, even late game decks like
yeah,
Warrior. The amount of damage you can consistently push is quite a lot. I think it's a pretty good deck. It's going to be pretty nice against Flood Paladins and
mm,
Hunters because there's lots of taunts and there's a lot of swipes, which are really good at cleaning up
yeah.
their boards.
Exactly. And in the late game, also if you can finale it, the Trog Gem Tossers can push a lot of damage.
Yes.
Especially if you can combo it with like a swipe and you clear the full board and then all the damage from the Trog goes face.
Yep.
Which is like an extra 10 damage face for 3 mana, which is quite nice. Let's have a look at like what mulligan choices. I think you can just keep the Whelp, probably the Piper as well.
And the other well,
Yeah, this Whelp, the
yeah.
Splish Splash Whelp as well. Would you ever consider Take to the Skies as well in your mulligan? Maybe if you have a
Yes.
1 and a 2 already, or a 1.
Yes. Takes Disguise is a fine mulligan.
Mm.
In the matchups where you don't have to be on board as quickly, it's a bit
Yeah.
better. Just get that extra value. Um, Stuff like the Magical Dollhouse, I'd avoid keeping that in
Yeah,
the mulligan. It's more a card you want later on.
later.
The only times I'd keep it is if you already have there's Woodland Wonders that
Right.
summons 2 taunts is good turn 1 and turn 2.
Another one we haven't talked about is the Groovy Cat. Because like the Peaceful Piper draws it is the only beast in the deck, but what would you just still keep it on its own?
No, I
Or do
wouldn't
you just
generally.
really want to keep it to draw it off
Yeah,
the Piper?
I think also you don't want to be hero powering too much early in this deck.
Mm,
That's it's more of a mid to late game play, so
right.
it's not super necessary to have the Groovy Cat down on turn 2. You'd rather have like the ramp whelp or the taunts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally a little bit stronger.
One card we're going to quickly talk about is the Malfurion's Gift, because it's a 1 mana spell and it makes you discover a temporary Feral Rage, Wild Growth, or Swipe. So you have to play it on the turn you discover it, or else it'll just be gone again the next turn. Always been picking swipes because I just like the extra damage. Do you think there are other ways to play this card? Would you ever like pick a Feral Rage or a Wild Growth, for example, or do you really just want this card for that extra swipe with spell
It's
damage?
mostly going to be swipes. Situation you might want the armor if you're in dire straits against
Mm,
like a face deck
right.
later on. You could pick it. Um, I would generally avoid going for wild growth even on turn 3 when you have it available. This deck doesn't need a lot of mana
Hmm.
to do its turns, but it does like a lot of damage from the swipes and things. You
Yeah,
generally
true.
try and just rely on the Splish Splash Whelps for your ramp and use Malfurion's Gift mostly for swipes.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I've been doing as well.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, one quick look. Let's look at the Zodiacs. We have the Pylon and the Thicking module.
Yeah, it's not like super strong in this deck. This card slot is replaceable if you wanted to run something like Hearthstone Brew
Right.
for some extra late game oomph. That's perfectly fine. This is just a reasonably good card.
Yeah, I think it's mostly very good when you go against Hunter or Paladin because they flood the board. You can play some dragons and then just buff them pretty easily.
Yeah.
But if you're like in slower matchups or like against Warrior, for example, they don't play many minions.
No, it's not very good against Warrior.
Probably not very good.
So yeah. Replaceable if you wanna look at some different cards. This is probably the one to cut.
Okay. So that was it for the hero power druid. Let's go next. This one, people have some really mixed feelings about this one. It's the Highlander Warrior. It was already really strong before the patch. Turns out, even after all the nerfs, it's still one of the best decks in the game. And people are starting to get a little bit frustrated with the Bran in particular being a bit too strong, too oppressive, and not giving other value matchups, especially not giving much room for them in the meta right now.
Yeah.
But personally, if you just want to climb and there's a lot of aggro on ladder, I think it's a fine deck. Maybe it'll get nerfed again. People are really a bit mad about it right now.
Yeah, most people have seen this deck already. You're all familiar with it. The one thing I could recommend potentially is some tech choices. If you're facing a lot of mirrors of this, make sure that ETC's got a dirty rat in it. This one is an old build which has the gaslight. We don't need this anymore. But instead you put a dirty rat in here. Can help in the mirror potentially.
Yeah.
Also, another card is Caricature Artist. If you're facing a lot of mirrors, this one will help you find your Bran and your Boom Boss and stuff a bit easier. Find a way to slot this into the deck. You could potentially cut the Viper, for instance. It's not super necessary.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. Even cutting the Badlands Brawler is also reasonable.
Only if you face a lot of mirrors, right?
Yes, which you might do.
if you are facing a lot of like the Paladins and Hunters, I think you might want it.
Yeah, it's more of a tech card if you're facing more slower matchups. Yeah, there's not too much to say against the Warrior. Everyone's pretty familiar with it, I think.
Yeah, it's true. We changed the ETC already. Like maybe just for people who haven't been trying it, maybe a quick mulligan guide. What we look for generally with the deck. I like keeping the totem.
Yeah, always keep the totem.
The Town Crier.
The Town Crier also could keep. Steam Guardian is fine. It's generally matchup dependent what you want. Keeping Bran always is fine, but if it's your only card and you're against like something aggro,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The Bran isn't that important to win, but things like Bellowing Flames, very very good. Craftsman Hannah.
Yes, this one.
Just tune it to what matchup you're expecting. If you're in a mirror, obviously Bellowing Flames is not very good, but if you're against a Hunter, it's suddenly insane. So,
do you ever keep the Reno? Now that it's a 9 cost card.
No, I wouldn't do that. I think it's a bit too expensive.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think we need to talk too much about the Warrior. Everyone kind of already familiar with it. I just put it in the list because it's still a very, very good deck. Moving on, we have Spell Token Hunter. Now, I was looking at the stats on Hearthstone Replay to make this top 5, and this one was actually the best deck in the game right now from Diamond to Legends, with a almost 60% win rate. So if you want to climb fast, I think this might be the way to go for now. It's a pretty cheap deck as well. It's not hard to play, and even if you lose, the games are just really quick and you can just go again. Just maybe talk a bit about the mulligan quickly. What would you keep in with this deck?
You generally want Sneaky Snakes is probably the best. Tremors is good. Generally, the mana dictates a little bit on your mulligan. If you're in a matchup where you need to sort of sticky board, Saddle Up is a good keep in combination with Sneaky Snakes and things like that.
But do you keep it if you don't have those yet?
No, generally not. RC Rampage also good, I'd say, in the mulligan. You basically you want to have your 1-drop, and then you build the rest of your mulligan around it. If you have Sliver Spear, the bananas are a good keep, but bananas are not a good keep if you don't have Sliver Spear.
Yeah. Do you keep the gym, the jungle gym?
I would not generally, unless the rest of the hand is really good, including an RC Rampage.
Right.
Mantle Shaper, another one, could be a conditional keep if you have like the Sliver Spear and Bananas as your start. It's going to come down pretty cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
This deck has Leroy and Barak in it. Those aren't like necessary. You could play Kill Command instead of those cards as well if you want to be a bit more aggressive. That's perfectly fine.
It's fun. I think the list I faced on ladder mostly did play the Barak. I don't know if they played Leroy, but Leroy is still a nice card to finish the game. It's a 6 damage go face, insta.
Yeah.
But then again, Kill Command can deal 5 face, and even if there's stones, it won't stop you. So that's just whatever you want, I guess. Just if you want to replace them, go for it. If not, fine. The Ziliax, I think we know what it is.
Yeah,
right? It's
ticking pylon, pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. It's very good in this deck. It works well with all the little boys on board you summon.
General tips: if you're trying to set up a saddle up, sometimes holding the coin to do it is good. Sometimes keeping your sneaky snakes stealthed is good. Just try and build around making a lot of things on board on the same turn and then saddling up. The remote control weapon is a great way to do that. Also a good way to make your RC Rampage a bit stronger. You generally want that to be like 3/3s or 4/4s.
Yeah.
And it's usually not worth it if it's 1/1s or 2/2s.
Okay. One more question about the saddle up. How many minions do you generally want to have on the board before you saddle up? Because sometimes I see players being a little bit greedy and trying to build more and more board before playing this, and then their board gets cleared and this is dead in hand. So do you just want to tempo it early on when you can, or do you try to be greedy with it usually?
It's always an it depends with this kind of question. Depends on the matchup, how greedy you need to be. One thing with the saddle up, if you just got a board of 1/1s and you saddle it up, if you don't have Observer of Myths or the Leok to back it up, it's not going to be pushing a lot of damage. Anyway, so you probably want to go a little greedier with it because 3/1/1s, which with no backup, is not really a problem for your opponent. But if you do have all the backup extra damage, getting just a sticky board of 3 minions is usually enough, I would say.
Okay, nice. I don't think we need to talk much more about the Hunter because the deck is quite easy to play anyway. Okay. It's mostly just curving your stuff out and killing your opponent.
Yep.
So let's go to the next one, which is Flood Paladin. That's funny that these two decks are actually the only ones in tier 1 at the moment. It's the Hunter and the Flood Paladin, and I think the Flood Paladin is really good into the Hunter. So
yeah, this deck,
it's just a bit of choosing which one you want to go for.
This deck is it's going to depend on what you're facing a lot on that. This one does really well against other board-based decks. If you're facing a lot of Hunters or a lot of Zarimi Priests, that sort of thing, this one's going to perform really well. It does a bit worse if you're facing things like Death Knights with their clears.
Yeah.
Or, it's not too bad against Warrior, but it's not an ideal matchup.
No.
But yeah, generally other board-based decks, this is the one you want to pick.
Yeah. Okay. Mulligan. I think you want to look for a 1-drop. The Salesman is still very good.
Yeah. Gold Panna and Hi-Ho Silver are pretty good. Boogie Down is really solid. You don't want to overkeep too many 1-drops. I'd say just one.
Yeah.
Try not to keep more than one, so that your Boogie Downs are still good. Even if it's like a Righteous Protector, you could consider just throwing that away, particularly if you're on the coin, because it's not going to be that impactful early on anyway. But just getting a full value Boogie Down, potentially 2 of them, is a lot stronger.
Yeah. Do you keep the Trinket Artist? Because it does draw you 2 cards, but I found it, when I was playing the deck, I found it sometimes a bit too slow.
I'd say generally not. It's more of a card you want to refill your hand once you've established the rest of your curve.
Yeah, okay.
Some matchups like Showdown can be a fine keep. Always keep the Ziliax in this deck also.
It's the same one again.
Yeah. This with Showdown is scam you a lot of wins on turn 2, so definitely keep them together. If you're against board floody decks, Showdown can be a good keep because if you find Sea Giant, Ziliax, or Prismatic Beam, that can just be a huge tempo swing.
Do you ever keep the Beam in a board-based matchup if you already have, for example, Showdown?
Yes, together you keep them, but I would never keep the Beam on its own. Whereas Showdown, sometimes you can keep on its own because it works with a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so there's like the Beam has been nerfed already, right?
Yes.
A while ago. So it's not as easy to get it down anymore. So you do need to count a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
To see if you can pull off the Showdown plus Beam plus Sea Giant Dream combo.
Yep.
It doesn't come down as early anymore, so just make sure you count out how many minions are on the board and how much your discounts are. Because otherwise you might end up being short, well, like 1 mana short and not be able to do everything.
Yeah. It's definitely a good deck, this one, but it will, again, flourish in situations where you're against a lot of other board-based decks. That's where you want to play it.
But since the Hunter is also tier 1, you might actually face a decent amount of board-based decks at least. Okay, then we move on to the next one. It's the last one for today. It's Sludge Warlock. This deck was like quite popular a while ago, got nerfed, and people stopped playing it, and now suddenly it kind of made a comeback out of nowhere, I think. I didn't really face many on ladder, but looking at the stats, it's quite good. It's like high tier 2 at the moment. Can you tell me why people started playing it again? What are the good matchups for it?
Well, a lot of the other decks got nerfed. This deck didn't change too much with the rotation. It got nerfed a little bit before the rotation, and it lost its power level. And it's just generally this very similar deck as before. With Warrior's removal getting nerfed a bit, it's actually got a decent matchup into Warrior now.
Okay.
It's just it's generally got a lot of damage going for it. Against board-based decks, it's fine. Not as strong as the Paladin, of course, but it's just an all-round decent deck, I'd say.
Yeah, I can see it in the board-based decks. When you have Popgar, for example, with the Crescendo, if it got buffed a little bit, that might just be enough to turn the whole game round.
Yeah. The deck changed slightly from previous versions. There's no longer the location, and because the location got nerfed, you no longer run the 1 mana buff. I remember the name right now.
Yeah, I know which one you mean.
Monstrous Form. Yeah, because there's no location to double copy the buff, so that's no longer in the deck. But you have cards like Demonic Studies now, which helps you find extra copies of Waste Removers and the Baritone Imps for extra things, and also discount them, so you can potentially get them down a bit earlier sometimes.
Right, okay, so the only thing we need to have a look at is the mulligan, and then we will reach the end of this video. Mulligan, what do we keep? We might keep the Imp.
Yes.
The both Imps, actually, I think.
Yeah,
Flame Imp and Baritone.
Sludge on Wheels is usually the best card to have in the mulligan with this deck, especially if you're against a board-based deck. They're mostly the ones you want to be keeping. Disposal Assistant's also okay, particularly if you have Waste Remover. Those go pretty well together.
Okay, I'm gonna have a quick look at the Ziliax. It's a different one this time. We have Haywire and Power.
Interesting.
So at the end of your turn, deal 3 damage and double attack. Do you think this is necessary in the deck? Is this how you would play it?
It's not super necessary this card, but I mean this is one that's probably pretty good against Warrior if you face a lot of them. This particular Ziliax configuration is very good. It's a bit weaker if you're against board-based decks, but again, depends what you face. You can adjust this. I think that's fine. Other cards you could include if you really wanted to. Endgame's actually not too bad in this deck, particularly if you're running studies. You can sometimes pick up Malefic Rook. I can't say that. And it can also res the Waste Remover. So.
Right. Okay. Well, that was it. Do you have a favorite deck out of these 5 that you would say I recommend this one?
I would say the Druid. It's the freshest deck. Also, it's not really got terrible matchups. It's just a good all rounder, and you get to do a lot of face damage. It's pretty fun to play.
It is. It is pretty fun.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay,
How about you?
I would say Spell Token Hunter because it's the best deck.
Okay.
The games are fast. You don't have to think too much. You can just jam it on ladder and hit legend quite easily, I think. Well, that was it for today, guys. Let me know what you think, which decks you are gonna try, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.